So, hello and welcome to an installment of the FIT Soul Club Oral History project, a program at Fashion Institute of Technology, which is one of the 64 institutions that comprise the State University of New York. This project is generously funded by FIT President Joyce F. Brown through her Diversity Grant Program initiative. And we also certainly want to give an acknowledgement to the Gladys Marcus Library, Andrea Klein, the cataloging associate, and Karen Trevette, the associate professor and head of special collections and college archives. I am Tor Orange, director of the Office of Educational Opportunity Programs. The Soul Club of FIT was created and organized by a community member at FIT, Clara Branch, in 1968 following the death of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The resulting interview will be made available via the FIT Library's website platform called Archive on Demand. The digital file and its transaction will become part of the official college archives. The library's unit of special collections and college archives administers the FIT oral history programs. We are coming to you today from the FIT campus on West 27th Street in Manhattan, New York City. It is November 29th, and the time is 5:20 p.m. I have the honor and privilege to be joined today by Karen Curinton, who is an FIT alum, but equally important, has been a major player in preparing EOP students at FIT. So Karen, it's a pleasure and my honor to be on this end of the table, sharing this interview with you.
I'm so happy to be here and so lovely to see you as well. And thank you for inviting me.
So I have, Karen, a quote and would love for you to respond to it in any way that seems appropriate. And the quote is, "Behind every strong person is a story that gave them no choice."
Well, I will tell you, for me, the Soul Show, Clara Branch, being part of a community was the choice that I made that was just so overwhelming for me, being a student here at the school. So it was something that needed to be done and a way for me to kind of vent and enjoy a bit of creativity. So I think that being part of that organization, there was no choice for me. I had to do this.
But how did you even get to FIT and the Soul Club?
Well, for me, I was a graduating senior from the 4-year program, and I was shy, and I needed something to say, let's be out there, with the job market and all. I just needed an outlet that would give me a chance to grow. And there was a club that said, welcome all, designers, models, etc. And I said, I'm going to do this. I got up the nerve to audition first as a model and designer later on. So it was great that she gave me that opportunity. I have to laugh because I was the shortest of the models, and I had to stand up next to the tallest young lady to see if there was a nod for me to be a part of it. But I had to also prove myself. So that was exciting.
Frame it in terms of timeline. So when might this have been?
I started in 79. I was graduating in 80. And I was part of the program from 79 to 91, 92 at the time that we were having the show. So that I was fresh coming into this program, not understanding what the Soul Show was, but understanding that it was for a good cause, creating funds for students who needed books or just items to help pay for their college tuition or just some incidental. So every year we would have this show to promote it, and I know for myself coming into the program, it had already been established. And so it was, what can I do to build my own little niche and to show part of creativity for myself as well as for the community, just being part of a community.
That the issue of having a platform that not only showcased the talents of students of color, but also had a mission of helping with resources, materials, and books is a theme that's come up a few times in prior interviews. Say a little bit more about what you understood, or the complementary mission.
Yes, I think that as far as the students of color here at the school, perhaps it may have been hard for them to purchase at the time, who knows, a $60 textbook or just supplies that would help them with their technical skills. So that was a great way for Clara at the time to purchase books, purchase supplies, and the students would just come in need, and she was able to dole out the supplies for the students. So from what I understood, it was about supplies and materials that would help students who perhaps couldn't afford to purchase at the time. So that was the cause that I felt was the best in response to us putting on a show.
Say more about who you are and how you even arrived at FIT. Why did you arrive at FIT? What was the origin of your talents and how you made it here?
Okay, well, as a young girl at age 5, I know that I would walk around in my home with a folder full of drawings, sketches. And anytime I would go somewhere, whether it's out even at church, I would have my folder and I would sit and I would sketch.
Did you really?
I sure did.
As a child?
At age 5, I'll tell you why and how I knew. My mother would work. She was a telephone operator at night. My father would be home watching the three of us, my sister and my brother. And my father used to watch the news and watch 3 or 4 television programs with the sports. And I happened to be fidgeting and just, he had the Sunday paper all over the place, the Times, and then all of the papers.
Those were the days when there was one TV.
There it is. So he had the paper and he says, Karen, come sit next to me. He says, here, read the paper. Well, I opened it up and there was this beautiful picture of a model in a black raincoat with an umbrella and these beautiful black shiny shoes, boots, excuse me. And so there was, I don't know where and how I found it, but there was a blank cardboard, and I found a pencil and I started sketching the model. My father looked at it and says, oh my goodness, he says, this is incredible. And when my mother got home, he showed her the picture. He said, we got to get her into art school. So I joined an after-school art program to hone my skills in painting and sculpture. So this is at age 5. They were able to navigate me into art classes. And that was the start of it all. And then in high school, I had a wonderful mentor, Northern Bing. And at the High School of Music and Art, there was no fashion program. But he took about 5 or 6 of us. And after school, he would sit and bring in the Women's Wear Daily. And he would have us draw the items there. So I started to build a portfolio. At the time of college, he said, well, you've got to try FIT. You have to attend FIT or Pratt or some of the fashion colleges. Well, I took to FIT campus right away. And that's how I arrived here and was very focused. I was not good at the sewing and the technical part that grew, but I enjoyed the art, the design aspects. And even as a young girl, I would wear clothing that was just so outrageous in the 70s. My mother would look at me and say,
an outrageous period.
It was. And that was the thing. I mean, I walked out with all types of colors and crazy. And so my mother and my father allowed for me to be me. So that's why and how I joined the school. And that's why I wanted to be a part of a bigger group that was more, well, again, people that look like me. Having a class size of 20 students and myself, perhaps one other person looking like me, an African-American student, there was no vehicle for me to gravitate towards. And when I found out from another student that there's the Soul Show or the Soul Club, would you like to join it? I sure did. And then coming to find out there was an annual fashion show. I said, well, let me try, since I am about to graduate, let me try my hand at designing some clothes, and perhaps it'll be good enough to be awarded into the show.
So how, I as someone who's outside of the industry and to this day will always draw stick figures, but I heard lots of stories during my time at FIT when there was an era for students of color being discouraged even from adding hues to their croquis
Interesting.
or limiting body dimensions and things of that sort.
Hmm.
Not so true.
Not for me. I don't know, maybe because I was naive. I was one of the younger students, coming into the school. And I came in at 16, and so, going through it, and maybe it just went over my head. I don't know. So I knew that I just wanted to be a part of a program where I could just make friends, because I was a loner in school anyway. So it was all about my craft, my work, and I went home.
Mm-hmm.
So this gave me an opportunity. So I'm not sure, not to say it didn't exist, but I will say that.
Didn't experience it directly.
But there was a point that I found that it had to do, not necessarily, it was a course that we took, a production course. And I will have to admit that the 4 students who were in the class received D as a final grade. And we all, as a group of African-American students, suggested we would like to take the test again. How could all of us receive the same grade? So he allowed for us to retake the test. And the grade went up just a little bit, but I'm glad we, at least as a group, approached it. So I think in regards to perhaps racism, we don't know. And again, as a 17, 18-year-old, I don't know what I was feeling at the time. Mm-hmm. So that was something that I think we explored. And that was my first, I guess, running of something, and I don't even know how I can pinpoint it, to be honest with you, but we just needed to explore it further. But I'm glad we had the option, and we also, as a group, and that was the whole point, as a group, we went to this teacher to say we weren't really accepting the grade. Can we retake it? And we did that as a group. And I found the power in having a voice with a group of folks.
Especially coming from the preparation you did from music and art. So for someone who might be viewing this, who does not recall or never knew about Music and Art High School, say a little bit about your preparation there, because that really does set the stage for a certain level of excellence here.
I loved my high school. I was just telling a friend, there was a snow day, there was a blizzard, and I cried because my mother would not let me go to school. She would not let me go to school, and I couldn't understand why. It was a blizzard. The camaraderie of music and art students, I felt like I was on a campus. Actually, we were on the City College campus, and we had
up on the hill.
On the hill.
My older brother attended.
Oh my goodness, it was
up
fantastic. You could hear
in Harlem.
In Harlem, absolutely. And you know what? It was diverse. We had all groups of folks attending the school, and we were all friendly, and the love of being creative, whether it's music, smelling the oil paints, and coming out of the classrooms, or hearing the music, classical music, jazz, coming from the windows. It was such a wonderful moment in time where I was so happy to experience it. And I have long-lasting friends from the high school. But it allowed for my creativity, allowed for me to be free and to just be myself. So that was a beautiful school, and the memories are just priceless. Yeah.
I certainly wish that my mother had experienced you, because for my brother, she could never find him. When he should have been in school, he was off playing his saxophone with God knows who.
Sure, yes, yes.
Where were you born, raised?
Born and raised Harlem, USA.
Where are you really?
I certainly was.
Where?
Mount Sinai Hospital. And I lived on 138th Street, Lenox Avenue.
And Lenox.
138th and Lenox.
So right up from, not far from the Schomburg.
That is correct.
Round the corner, or certainly close enough to Abyssinian Baptist.
I believe so. That is on
Harlem Hospital.
Yes, 135th. Yes, absolutely.
Share the story. So parents from where?
Well, my father, Dominican, and born and raised in Florida, and he came up and met my mom, and she was born and raised in New York, but her family is from Columbia, South Carolina. And they lived in Harlem. That's where they met. And once the 3 children were born, we moved to the Bronx. I think it was about 7, something like that. When it's about 7.
And what part of the Bronx?
Oh boy. I'm going to say it was Shakespeare Avenue. I'm not sure if that's the West Bronx. I am not sure. But it's off
I think so.
170th Street
Yes.
and Everett Grant Highway. So it's that vicinity. I don't know too much about it because then, once I got into high school, we moved to Queens after that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Describe what you encountered at FIT before encountering the Soul Club.
Rigorous schedule, and to the point where I was commuting, so I didn't stay in the dorms. So it was about work and get home in time. My mother wanted us to be home, so I was the first one going to college at the time. I feel it's a blur because if I could go back in time, I think I could have been a better person as a designer. I think I was just getting the work done to the point where perhaps I didn't, and I'll explain why. I felt that I didn't really grasp everything that I needed to. I needed outside help because of the fact that I was shy. And now that we tell our students, we say, if you have a question,
Speak up,
or wait, after class, or send an email. I would gather my information and then I would go and I would get the work done. But I felt like I didn't grasp it like I should because I was quiet. So from that point of view, the work was okay. It could have been better. My grades were okay. They could have been better. I think because the fact that I was a shy person. My mother is shy. My sister and my brother are the opposite of me. They're just so outgoing. And I think over the years, I've become a little bit more open. But I'm going to tell you, and that's why I love the Soul Show so much, because for the 12 years that I was part of it, I mean, being on stage modeling, designing for a cause, fittings, things like that, time frames, talking, speaking, expressing myself. It definitely changed me as a person.
You've stayed connected, at least from my perspective, very connected to the institution, to your department, to the students generally, to students of color.
I did.
Why so?
Well, I think the time that when I was offered a position to teach here, I had already had about 10, 11 years of industry experience. But it was at the time that the president, Marvin Feldman, had saw me into the school based on the fact that we were doing the Soul Show. By me being a part of the Soul Show, he would always come to the show, the president of the college, very supportive. And he says, why not come to school and teach here? We need diversity. He was very open to me about it. We need diversity. Perhaps funding would be implemented to the school. We just need more teachers of color to be part of the school. So when I found that out, I said, well, let me try. Let me try to do this. And I put a portfolio together. I already had the 10, 12, we needed 6 years of industry experience. I already had 10 years.
Wow.
I had 10 years. At the time, it was 6 years. So I went and interviewed and saw some of my old professors. And I walked in there with a little bit more confidence and being able to show the work that I had created or was a part of in the industry. And I was impressed that they were impressed. So I couldn't believe I was now faculty at the school. So when I had students that looked like me, it was always a shock. There was a time I started classes on a Saturday afternoon. That was my first, teaching gig. And I would sit in the seats and have, as the students come in for the first day, I would sit and I go, where's Professor Rippy? Where's this professor at? And I would get up and I would say, I'm Professor. I would introduce myself. We thought you were a student. But back in the day, I would always wear suits. And I think for me, the suit showed a sense of structure, sense of empowerment. It was me. I started in 90. And I loved wearing a suit. Even on a Saturday afternoon, I was constantly in suits. And I demanded that respect because, yes, I'm your teacher, I'm your instructor, but I just wanted to make sure that you recognize that I have some years experience on you, even though I looked like a lot of, the age and, looking at, we looked the same. And or to the point where age difference was, I was at the time with 31. I had students who were 21, 23, 25, who were taking these classes.
But also a great way to role model a certain kind of presentation, so that they understood that professionalism could also look like this,
Yes.
and not just the creative kind of, it can also look like this.
Well, there would be students who would come up to me and go, wow, Professor Rippy, how'd you get this job? Or something to that effect, like, we didn't know that we had Black professors, or, I've never had a Black professor before. This is my first faculty, who we look like each other, so that was kind of nice, to hear that. And, the sense of pride that they took and seeing that someone was at the helm, helping them move forward, push forward.
And that it's possible, Karen, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. We can dream, but they say dreaming and hoping are not strategies. It's important for us to see what we need to see in order to know that it's possible.
Right. Absolutely.
And so you've now been with the college for how long?
Oh boy, 32 years. This September made 32 years teaching. Yeah, I can't believe the time is really gone.
You're still smiling, Karen.
I am.
You haven't been traumatized by it.
No, and
You're very popular here. You're very.
Is that right?
Yes.
Well, during pandemic, when we were in front of a TV screen, I don't tell all my faculty because I will hear the difference, but I loved it. I found a way to engage my students, and we got it done.
Yes.
We got it done. Yeah.
I can attest to that because you were also teaching with EOP during the summer, and we had to deliver a remote for 2 years.
Yes, we did.
For 2 summers,
That's
consecutive
right.
summers.
That's right.
Remote summer programs.
That's
and
right.
you were certainly in it to win it. And the design students were engaged.
Absolutely.
I don't think they even know what they missed. As incoming students, I don't even think they missed the in-person experience, because you made that experience come alive for them and held them accountable.
Yes, absolutely. They had to be. Yeah. It was fantastic, though.
Share with us some of the other ventures that your talents have taken you. Did I ever tell you the story of being at my aunt's for a family gathering, I think it was, and she's very much into dolls. I mean, an incredible collection of dolls. And she's very creative herself. In any event, she showed me something that I fell in love with. And I said, where did you get that from? And she said, someone in Yonkers. She was kind of casual about it, someone in Yonkers. And I think they were fashion designer too. I think they do lingerie or something. But they also do dolls, only to discover that it was you.
It was me. Isn't that something?
Small world.
Small world. And, I tell you, and this is what I tell my students, this is related. It's an umbrella. Fashion design, you never know what you can get involved into. And at the time, my daughter was learning dance. We were taking her to recitals, and she wanted to dance, 5, 6 years old. And at the recital, I said, I'm thinking, well, flowers, that's nice, but I want to do something different.
For her.
For my daughter, to present to her for her months of hard work. I decided to make her a fabric doll with the little tutu and the little pink shoes. And I even went and bought a wig and put an afro and, a little brown skin doll. And when I presented it to her, all her little friends were around her. I want one. And I took numbers, and I got my little
your first order.
That was my first order. 3 dolls that I made. I'm like, oh my God, I have to repeat this? And that was about 6 years. I did that for 6 years, and it was extra income. But for me, it was a way of traveling with my family. In the summer months, I would make my dolls. In the summer months, we would start, perhaps go to Maine. I would find if there was a craft fair and different Afrocentric fairs, but it didn't matter. Italian fairs, things like that. So what I would do is I would say to folks, give me an heirloom. It could be a tablecloth. I had one parent. She had a tablecloth from Italy, and it had her colors, and I made her a doll. I made a couple dolls with her tablecloth, and it was something that her parents or faculty member, I keep saying faculty, a parent had given to her. And that was her way of keeping the heirloom, but in a doll where she could sit. So that was fun for me. I enjoyed that. It's just got a little bit too busy. I was involved in a couple of stores just rented in Mount Vernon. So that allowed for me to show my craft with the dolls. But that was a lot of fun for me. A lot of fun.
What are you doing these days, and where are you?
Oh boy. So right now I'm freelancing. Right now I'm also, it's just a whim, but every other Saturday I go to Washington, D.C., and I work with the Washington Wizards dance group. And I help them, I kind of give them,
Wow.
yeah, it's so much fun. I work with the lead dancer and stylist, and I help them with their garments, their dance garments. So the leotards and trims, details, and I will resource and suggest where we go. But they bring me in, I do fittings. So every other weekend, this has been going on since June. So
And share for the viewers, who are the Washington Wizards?
well, the Washington Wizards is a basketball team, and I work with the dancers. So that's been so exciting to see them perform, but just actually to work with beautiful people who have movement, and for me to be able to suggest things that will allow for them to step up their
Come
game
alive.
in visuals, in that respect. So I do that. It's been different. I've been working with a company called Adore Me, and it's an online company, and the same. Online situations are very new, but I'm learning where we are fitting. We have customers who will, for their bras as well, bra design, camisoles, panties, lingerie. They will send in their measurements, and we will fit a bra to their measurements. So that's been exciting. It's been so exciting.
You better hope many more women don't see this. What's more glorious than a well-fitting brassiere?
Yeah, we try. We give
Something as basic as that.
Absolutely. And once we have their template, it's
Yes.
easy to produce. Yes.
And you've also done lingerie.
That's
You have a long history in lingerie.
Yes, that was and I'll tell you, that's part of the FIT experience. I had a faculty member who just imparted so much wisdom, and I was like, that's what I want to get into. I want to get into lingerie design. And that was my career,
And that
lingerie.
began here.
That
at
began at
FIT.
FIT. She was fantastic, yeah. But I think the point is too, going back to FIT, the wisdom of having a faculty member who really nurtured me too here, because she saw something and she would, Rippy, come over here, or Karen, and just come and let me show you this. And, it was a great way for me to learn from a faculty member that allowed for me to grow in industry. Nori Ellis was the person. She was a wonderful lady, and she knew her art form.
So as we come back around to Clara Branch,
Yes.
if Clara were here, what would you say to her?
Very interesting. Besides giving her a big old juicy hug and just telling her, she was an inspiration. She was my inspiration. I'm still here. I'm still plugging away at design. She made it possible for us. She made it possible for me not to give up, because there were times that at the show, if something wasn't right, we'd do it again from the top. An hour, 2-hour show, we'd start at 11 o'clock, we'd start again. So excellence, making sure that you are producing your best work. And I hope that I was able to do that with her and just moving forward for myself.
Thank you very much.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. It's just wonderful to be a part of this archive. And I hope when people see this that they're inspired.
I am confident they are and will be.
Fantastic.
So say a bit more for the viewership about the kinds of activities that you were engaged in during the Soul Club shows.
All right. Well, I will say that the month of January was very, it was workable. It was a working session, especially working or teaching. That was our hiatus. It was time for me to get fabrics, produce sketches, to present them to Clara, and to be edited. And once they were edited, it was time to make patterns, to drape, and model fittings. This is January. So when the I think usually the second week of February was when we had our show. So we say the last week in January, the first week perhaps in February, something along those lines. We were fitting models and we were producing the show. Clara was in regards to music, staging, fittings, finding models. She was in charge of all of that. And from there, the rehearsals came. So rehearsals were endless. And a lot of times the rehearsals were in full clothing and the dress rehearsal. So when we were ready to work, Clara wanted to make sure you were going to work. And for me, it was double duty because not only was I designer, I started out as a model, but then I said, well, you know what, let me see if I can design a few things. And it was great, a 10 or 12 piece presentation for me under the guise of loungewear.
Is that what she would request?
That was 6 to 12 pieces.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
And that was a nice presentation, 6 to 12 pieces. And it was great working with the models. Once you worked with them, you pretty much had their measurements. So you were able to pinpoint or adjust designs for their personalities. There was a couple of ladies who were very tall and elegant, and I made sure that we had flowy garments where they could twirl. And then there are some girls that are a little bit more sporty and fun, so being on stage allowed for their personalities to come out. So it was great for me, still being in school, and then the years that I was working, trying to come up with a presentation with a color story, music that would send off my my scene, our scene. And so it was always fun to do that.
You participated in sort of a show that was almost like a capstone to your senior year.
Yes.
But you attended some others?
Yes.
Is there one critical show that was like the most memorable that you can recall?
Yes, it was the show that I produced, and I think at the time I won Designer of the Year. And I was trying for that title, and I think it was either the last year that Clara was affiliated with the show. And it was just such a feeling to be created, considered the Designer of the Year. And it was I used to get help from a lot of resources, being that I was working in industry, and I would ask them for donations for the Soul Show. So I used to get free fabrications, and that was wonderful because I could pick pretty much any fabric and they would donate it to me. So there weren't any restraints in price. So I wanted this, I was able to get it and be able to put together the 10 or 12 pieces because I had the yardage for it, I had the fabrication for it due to the donations. And we made sure that the donations were identified in the program. But that was a year that stood out for me. And to have my mother, who attended every show, my father had since passed away, just to have the family in the audience and my girlfriends from high school, to come and support. That was always a great feeling for me. But that was the year that I won Designer of the Year. That was just amazing for me.
Why do you think this was so important to you?
For me, winning, I think for me, Clara saw the growth. My first few years as a designer, okay, the clothing, the sewing was basic, and the design was basic, but it got better. And from, I think in 79 to 91 or 92, I forget, the year, you could see how I grew as a designer, technically, with the workmanship. So for me, I was proud to present, and it was always an exciting. But to have my mother, who was my backbone, to see her joy in having her daughter produce, or to be a part of the commitment of a show, as well as being able to being part of a show that would allow for funds that would go to, is our way of giving back to the community. So I thought that was kind of a great way to be a part of a bigger audience, but just to see that, the family and I think Clara too, just, her and Leland Michael were the ones who would, bestow the awards to the students, etc. But that was just a good time for me. Mm-hmm.
Do you ever envision a time when maybe something similar will return to FIT, that kind of platform?
I hope so. I think folks recognize that it's a big undertaking.
Mm-hmm.
One,
it's a job
booking,
in and of itself.
Yes, models,
Yes.
designs, keeping up with people, the paperwork. It's a bit much. I even decided at one point, I know there was a faculty member who took it on for 2 years, and she recognized it was a bit much. And I even said myself, when I was in front of committee, that I would love to take on the responsibility, of the social, but it just didn't get off the ground. But the reward is priceless. But I think the time involved, you need Clara and Lena are probably the sole people really running everything. We need a team. We really do, to delegate. So I can see that happening.
Do you think students have the same level of, not commitment, because I think they do. But do you think students have the same level of commitment to rise to that kind of an occasion? Meaning, as you described, the intensity of rehearsals, the amount of hours.
Yes.
Do you think students are hardwired in that way anymore?
In my heart, I want to say yes. I look at my students, and sometimes the dedication that they put into their workmanship says to me that they are excited about their creativity and the workmanship that they put in. I would hope so. And I think with the social justices that are going on in the world, we need to be a part of something that we can give back and perhaps have a platform for students to be creative, and under the venue of FIT, and having your team circle around and say, we can do this as a group. I would hope, that is my hope, that we could do something like that.
And to groom students, I mean, to not wait until 11th or 12th year, but to really have a true pipeline that prepares students much sooner and much earlier. We have to create what we want to see.
Absolutely.
We have to create that. We have to grow the kids to that level.
Right. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you, my dear. Thank you.